broke my heart because I'm like, you in jail for something you really didn't even know what had happened. All you knew was a fight that broke out and someone got...
New Orleans rapper Mac Phipps is another step closer to coming home after serving 20 years in prison.
They had no evidence whatsoever suggesting Mac was a killer. All they had was the statements of some individuals alleging that Mac was the shooter.
He was thriving, breaking records, climbing the charts, going gold, and backed by one of the most powerful movements hip-hop had ever seen, Master P's No Limit Records. That was the story of Mac Phipps. But soon, everything came crashing down.
Mac was on the verge of being huge, man. That man not only lost his life with this case, he lost a career.
At just 24, he would find himself locked behind bars for the next 2 decades in one of the most feared prisons in America, and even worse, for a crime he didn't commit, shattering his entire dream. Let's dive in. McKinley Mac Phipps Jr. was born on July 30th, 1977, in the Broadmoor neighborhood of Uptown New Orleans. He was the oldest of 6 kids, and from early on, it was obvious he was different. While other kids his age were outside running around, Mac was inside writing rhymes, sharpening his pen, and jumping into neighborhood rap battles. By the time most kids were still figuring themselves out, Mac was already winning local talent shows and building a reputation as a serious lyricist. That talent showed up early. In 1990, when he was just 13 years old, Mac released his first album, The Lyrical Midget, under the name Lil Mac.
By the time he was 12 years old, he had recorded his first album.
The project came out on Yo Records and was produced by Mannie Fresh, long before he became one of hip-hop's most influential producers. The music didn't sound like it came from a kid. It was sharp and lyrically advanced. You could hear that Mac was really saying something.
I'm the type of guy that's gotta have wheels. I need a car bad.
By the mid-1990s, his buzz had reached New York. Def Jam Records, one of the biggest labels in hip-hop, took notice and offered him a deal. For most artists, that would have been a dream come true. But Mac saw things differently. Instead of heading to New York, he chose to stay home. He turned down Def Jam and signed with Master P's No Limit Records, which was quickly becoming a powerhouse out of New Orleans.
When I left out of the meeting with Kevin Lyles, I ran into Master P on the elevator with all of the other guys, and he was like, man, we got a party upstairs, come upstairs. We talked, he said, man, come to the studio Thursday with KL. And I came to the studio with KL, and I never moved back home.
That choice changed everything. No Limit had a very specific image, hard, street-oriented, gritty, and to fit into that world, Mac had to evolve. He dropped the Lil from his name and shifted away from conscious rap into a darker, more aggressive persona. He became the camouflage assassin. It was a complete transformation, but it worked. Mac fit right into No Limit's machine. He became one of the label's most active and visible artists, popping up on albums by Master P, Mystical, C Murder, Mia X, and others. He also joined the 504 Boys, No Limit's in-house supergroup. On July 21st, 1998, Mac released his breakout solo album, Shell Shocked, through No Limit and Priority Records. The album was stacked with features Snoop Dogg, Soulja Slim, Silk the Shocker, and nearly the entire No Limit roster. It made an immediate impact, debuting at number 11 on the Billboard 200 and peaking at number 4 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart. The album went gold, and just like that, Mac was a star at only 21 years old.
That was the album that introduced me to the world. Shell Shock was the album that introduced me nationwide to the world.
He followed it up with World War III on September 28, 1999. The album debuted at number 44 on the Billboard 200. And while it didn't hit quite as hard commercially, Mac's career was still on a steady rise. He had a clean record, a growing fan base, and the backing of one of the most successful independent labels hip-hop had ever seen. Everything pointed toward a long, successful future. No one knew that this would be the last music Mac would ever release as a free man. On the night of February 21st, 2000, Mac drove out to Club Mercedes in Slidell, Louisiana, about 30 miles northeast of New Orleans. He was scheduled to perform, and the club was packed. His mother and other family members came with him, just like they often did. The night started off normal. Mac took the stage and began performing, feeding off the energy of the crowd. Then things went left. A large fight broke out on the dance floor right in front of the stage. From where he stood, Mac could see the chaos building. Suddenly, he heard a gunshot. Instinct kicked in. He dropped to the ground immediately.
Then you hear like a bottle break and a gunshot.
As soon as I heard the gunshot, I basically, like, all in one motion, when I heard the shot, I went to the ground. I took the young lady who was next to me, I pulled her down.
In the middle of the confusion, 19-year-old Baron C. Victor Jr. was inside the club. According to accounts, he was trying to break up the fight when another shot rang out. Victor was hit. Injured and panicked, he ran toward the front door before collapsing near the entrance. He would later die from his wounds. Like many performers during that era, Mac was carrying a gun for protection. He pulled it out and moved toward the front entrance, not looking for trouble, but trying to find his mother and make sure his family was safe. The mistake, though, was that he held the gun above his head. According to Mac, he did that so he wouldn't bump into anyone in the chaos and accidentally cause the gun to go off.
I pulled my gun out and held it over my head because I didn't want to bump into anybody. You know, I was looking for my mom. I wanted to go secure her, make sure she was straight. I didn't want to risk bumping into somebody and having the gun go off, so I held it above my head. I'm taller than everybody, so I'm like, if this gun is here, everybody is safe.
Mac regrouped with his family, got them out of the club, and drove back to his home in Baton Rouge. He had no idea anyone had been seriously injured, let alone killed. Hours later, his world flipped upside down. Police showed up at his door with an arrest warrant.
You had policemen with shotguns and pistols. They came over there and they asked me, "Are you Mac?" I said, "No, I'm his father." And they said that, Mac is wanted for a murder.
Mac was stunned. He didn't run. He cooperated completely, waived his rights, and answered every question they asked. He believed the truth would clear everything up. But by that point, the police had already made up their minds. From the very beginning, Mac was their suspect, and they weren't interested in looking anywhere else. Now, just days after Mac was arrested, something happened that should have changed everything about the case. A man named Thomas Williams, someone from Mac's circle who had been working security at the club that night, walked straight into the police station and confessed. In a videotaped statement, Williams admitted that he was the one who fired the fatal shot. Williams explained exactly how it went down. During the chaos of the fight, he said the young man rushed toward him holding a beer bottle. In the heat of the moment, Williams panicked. He pulled out his gun and fired, believing he was about to be attacked.
I was just standing there, I was panicking. I reached and I fired. Because I was nervous, I didn't know what else to do. I was protecting myself.
So it was inside your waistband?
Yeah.
Okay, but it wasn't no kind of holster?
No. Just panicking.
After you shot him, what happened?
Everybody just started running.
Williams even estimated the distance between himself and Baron Victor, about 6 to 10 feet. On top of that, ballistics evidence confirmed that Mac's revolver was not the weapon that killed Victor. At that point, any reasonable case should have fallen apart. You had a recorded confession from another man and forensic evidence backing it up. That should have been the end of it. But prosecutors weren't interested in ending anything. Instead of accepting the confession, Assistant District Attorney Bruce Deering dismissed it entirely. In court, Deering painted Thomas Williams as a career criminal whose word couldn't be trusted. He argued that Williams was simply being loyal, willing to take the fall to protect Mac, the famous rapper with money and influence. They also zeroed in on one detail. Williams said he fired from 6 to 10 feet away, while the coroner's report suggested the shot came from closer range. That contradiction was all prosecutors needed to toss the entire confession aside. Even more telling, they never called Williams to testify at Mac's trial. Instead, Williams himself ended up charged with obstruction of justice, simply for giving a statement that conflicted with the coroner's report. He eventually pleaded guilty and served time. When Mac finally went to trial in 2001, the case against him was thin at best. There was no murder weapon, No forensic evidence, no fingerprints, no gunshot residue tying him to the killing.
They did gunshot residue tests on his hands. They came back negative. No gunshot residue or anything was found on his clothing. They had no evidence whatsoever.
What the prosecution did have was something else entirely: Mac's image. Bruce Deering built his case not around evidence, but around Mac's rap persona. Over and over, he focused on Mac's stage name, the Camouflage Assassin. He repeated it constantly, making sure it stuck in the jurors' minds.
The Camouflage Assassin. What does that mean?
That is simply a nickname he had. It was just hip-hop. He's a lyrical assassin, not a person who kills people.
Then came the lyrics. Deering began quoting lines from Mac's music, particularly from Shell Shocked, using them as proof of violent intent. But it went even further than that. He didn't just quote the lyrics, he manipulated them. He took lines from two completely different songs and stitched them together into a single fake quote that sounded far more threatening. Murder, murder, kill, kill, you F with me, you get a bullet in your brain. To seal that image, prosecutors laid out every gun found in Mac's house in front of the jury, turning the courtroom into a visual spectacle. What they didn't explain was that those firearms belonged to Mac's father, a Vietnam veteran whose military duties involved handling and loading weapons. But the most damaging part of Mac's trial wasn't even the twisted use of lyrics or his rap image. It was the witnesses the prosecution built their case around. Everything hinged on two people: Nathaniel Tillison, the victim's cousin, and Yulon James, a nursing student who had been at the club that night. Nathaniel Tillison gave the most explosive testimony. On the stand, he told the jury that he looked the rapper dead in his eyes and watched Mac pull the trigger and shoot Baron Victor. The problem was, it wasn't true.
Initially it was, I saw a person with a black handgun shot my cousin, and then it was, Mac had a chrome handgun, he shot my cousin, and then in the next statement he was holding his cousin, looking Mac dead in the eyes when he shot him, and so each time his statement changed.
Investigators already had evidence that completely destroyed Tillison's credibility. Another cousin of the victim, Jerry Price, had told police that Nathaniel Tillison wasn't even inside Club Mercedes when the shooting happened. According to Price, Tillison was outside in the parking lot, which meant he couldn't have seen anything that happened on the dance floor. Price was willing to testify to that in court. His statement alone could have shattered the prosecution's case, but the jury never heard it. Prosecutors never turned that information over to Mac's defense team. Under the Brady Rule, prosecutors are legally required to share any evidence that could help prove a defendant's innocence. Hiding Jerry Price's statement was a clear Brady violation. Things got even uglier when law enforcement tried to force Price to change his story. They presented him with a pre-written affidavit and pressured him to sign it, even though it contradicted what he actually witnessed. Price refused. Not long after, prosecutors charged him with obstruction of justice tied to first-degree murder, a charge serious enough to ruin his life. The charges only disappeared after Price demanded a speedy trial, essentially daring them to follow through. While Price was being threatened, Nathaniel Tillison was being protected. Later on, Tillison was arrested on felony charges of his own. Instead of letting the system take its course, Bruce Deering personally stepped in and helped get him released on an unsecured bond. The prosecution's second key witness, Yulon James, told a different story altogether. She testified that she saw sparks flying from Mac's gun as he fired. Her account didn't line up with Tillison's version of events, but prosecutors brushed over the inconsistencies. At the time, her testimony helped seal Mac's fate. But years later, the truth finally came out. In 2015, Yulon James publicly recanted her entire testimony. In an interview with the Huffington Post, she admitted that St. Tammany Parish authorities had pressured and threatened her into testifying against Mac. The Huffington Post investigation went even further. It uncovered that at least 4 other witnesses claimed they were intimidated, threatened, or simply ignored because their statements didn't fit the narrative prosecutors wanted. Anyone who didn't point the finger at Mac was either pushed aside or pressured into silence.
all of them, not just one, but every single one of them has said how they were allegedly threatened, intimidated, charges were filed against them. She revealed to me that authorities told her, well, hey, you're going to testify in this case, or, this was after she realized she was pregnant. They said, you're going to have that baby behind bars.
After closing arguments, the jury deliberated for about 6 hours. At one point, they asked the judge to clarify the difference between murder and manslaughter. An hour later, they came back with a verdict: guilty of manslaughter. On August 23, 2001, Mack was sentenced to 30 years in prison and sent to a Lane Hunt Correctional Center in St. Gabriel, Louisiana. He was just 24 years old. In a single moment, his music career was wiped out. His future disappeared. Everything he had worked for was gone, and he was innocent. Mack went on to serve his sentence inside Louisiana's notoriously harsh prison system, spending time at both Elaine Hunt and Angola, one of the most feared prisons in America. For 21 years, he never wavered. He maintained his innocence the entire time. Even when parole opportunities came with the unspoken understanding that admitting guilt would help, Mack refused. He wasn't going to lie his way out of prison. Despite the system being designed to break people, Mack did the opposite. He didn't get a single disciplinary infraction, something almost unheard of over 2 decades behind bars. He earned an HVAC degree, picked up multiple technical certifications, and became a mentor to younger inmates. He kept writing music, holding on to his creativity as a form of survival. Still, the mental toll was heavy. Mack watched hip-hop move on without him. He watched his family age from behind bars. He watched his youth, his dreams, and his prime slip away for a crime he never committed. Meanwhile, the people who helped put him there were out living their lives. District Attorney Walter Reed and Sheriff Jack Strain continued prosecuting cases, overseeing investigations, and shaping the local justice system. For years, activists complained about corruption, racism, and civil rights abuses coming out of that parish. Eventually, they were proven right. In 2016, the walls finally started closing in on Walter Reed, the same district attorney who oversaw Mack's prosecution. Federal investigators indicted Reed on 18 counts tied to campaign finance violations and insurance fraud. The investigation revealed a long-running pattern of corruption. Reed didn't care about justice, only power. On April 5, 2017, he was convicted and sentenced to 4 years in federal prison for wire fraud, money laundering, and conspiracy. In court filings, prosecutors pointed to his willingness to put people behind bars, a carefully worded way of saying he was reckless with people's lives as long as he got convictions. Sheriff Jack Strain wasn't far behind. Strain had overseen the investigation into the Club Mercedes shooting, and his own record was just as ugly. He was later charged with federal crimes, including running an illegal work release scheme. Strain had also made his mindset clear years earlier, when he openly said he didn't want temporary housing after Hurricane Katrina turning into long-term housing for thugs and trash in St. Tammany Parish. It was a statement soaked in racism, and by the time his crimes came to light, it was clear that attitude extended into how justice was handled under his watch. But by the time Reed and Strain were convicted, Mack had already lost 16 years of his life. In 2015, the Huffington Post began publishing a series of in-depth investigative reports on Mack's case. Journalists uncovered what the courts had ignored: the suppressed evidence, the witness intimidation, and Thomas Williams' videotaped confession that had been buried for more than a decade. The reporting reignited public outrage and brought national attention back to Mack's situation. That same momentum pushed Mack toward clemency. In 2016, he filed his first request. It was denied. In 2018, he tried again. This time, the pressure kept building. His family stayed relentless. His legal team kept pushing. Supporters rallied. Master P publicly advocated for him, using his platform to remind people that something was deeply wrong with the case. Finally, on February 22, 2021, the Louisiana Board of Pardons and Parole voted unanimously to grant Mack clemency. The board acknowledged both his spotless prison record and the serious questions surrounding his conviction. In March, Governor John Bell Edwards signed the order.
Mr. Phipps, your early release has been granted.
On June 22, 2021, McKinley Phipps Jr. walked out of Elaine Hunt Correctional Center a free man. He was 43 years old. He had spent 20 years and 4 months behind bars for a crime another man had confessed to committing. But clemency didn't mean the state admitted it was wrong. Mac wasn't exonerated. His conviction still stood. He was released early for good behavior and time served. Still, Mac didn't disappear after coming home. In September 2021, exactly 20 years after his incarceration began, he released 21 Summers, a deeply personal song reflecting on the decades stolen from him. And for the first time since 1999, Mac began working toward a full solo album. Mac also threw himself into activism, determined to make sure no one else went through what he did. He began volunteering with Son of a Saint, a New Orleans nonprofit that mentors and empowers at-risk boys. He started speaking at schools, including Einstein Academy in New Orleans East, telling students the truth about street life, the justice system, and how quickly everything can be taken from you, even when you're innocent. He also became a leading voice in the Free Our Art movement, a bipartisan nonprofit fighting to protect artists' First Amendment rights. The movement formed in response to a disturbing reality. Since the early 1990s, rap lyrics have been used as evidence in nearly 700 criminal cases. Mac's story became one of the most powerful examples of how art, especially black art, is weaponized in courtrooms.
Exoneration was always my goal, and still is. I always wanted to not only prove to the court system, but to prove to the victim's family. I've always wanted to prove to them that I didn't kill their son.
And the movement worked. California passed legislation limiting the use of rap lyrics in criminal trials. Louisiana followed with its own bill. By 2025, New York and Missouri were voting on similar measures. On the federal level, the RAP Act, Restoring Artistic Protection, was introduced in Congress, backed by major institutions like the Recording Academy, the RIAA, and SAGAFTRA. In April 2025, Mac appeared on CBS Mornings to talk about the issue. He explained it simply. Art, by definition, is not literal. It's expressive, it's allegorical, metaphorical, and open to interpretation. He pointed out the double standard, how rap lyrics are treated as confessions, while movies, novels, and rock songs are clearly understood as fiction. Today, Mac's attorney is still working to fully overturn his conviction. If successful, clemency and parole would become irrelevant. Mac would be officially exonerated. Until then, he lives under strict parole conditions, a 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. curfew, mandatory monthly community service, and a ban on entering places that serve alcohol. Despite losing 21 years of his life, people close to Mac describe him as relentlessly optimistic. He's focused on the future, on new music, on justice, and on making sure his story is the last of its kind.